The lock of the door clicked as he turned his key, and with a sigh, Arthur watched as the old, wobbly entrance swung inward. He had successfully done it, he told himself. Survived the vacation. With a big smile, he pulled the heavy suitcase in behind him and threw the door shut and looked around. The small apartment was exactly the way he had left it 8 days ago. No sign of entry. Nothing seemed stolen. Good. He felt tired and exhausted, but most of all, he was relieved. Going on vacation was stressful after all, but at least his worst fears hadn't come true. He hadn't forgotten to turn off the stove. No one had broken in, and the building hadn't collapsed while he was gone. So far, so good. A groan escaped him as he let go of the heavy suitcase and then stretched his thoroughly tense back. Home sweet home, Arthur thought, locked the door and began his slow walk through the apartment. Just because he hadn't been able to see anything out of the ordinary from the entrance didn't mean that nothing was missing, he told himself. The kitchen, small and cramped, was the way he had left it behind. He knew his fridge would be empty, since everything he had had in there 8 days ago would have gone bad in the meantime. Arthur opened a few cupboards and checked, but found no sign of anything being out of place. So he walked on toward the small living room. If anyone had managed to get in here, that would be the room they'd most likely plunder, he knew. He reached it, then looked, and breathed a sigh of relief. The TV was still on the wall. The couch was in the middle of the room, and even his console was there. No one had entered this place these past few days. Everything was okay. He was home. Instead of checking out the bedroom, Arthur walked over to the old couch and let himself fall onto it. It was soft and cool and smelled like home. He was back. The day after tomorrow, he'd be back at work. But that was a problem for Monday, not today. He sighed again, turned, and faced the back of the couch. The journey had been exhausting as well. He wasn't the biggest fan of planes, and especially layovers. Sitting in a foreign airport, waiting around, wasn't exactly what he would call fun. But these past 24 hours, he had done so twice. He could feel his body relaxing on the couch, the tiredness slowly taking over. Those past few days had been packed full of intense experiences. He had loved it. Almost all of it. The beaches, the people, the architecture. And especially that strange backstreet market his guide had shown him. Arthur smiled as he remembered. It had been his first solo vacation, but definitely not his last. He couldn't think of a time when he had felt this alive. Slowly he rolled over to not completely suffocate in the couch cushions and looked at the black TV hanging on the wall. Why couldn't life always be like this? This free? His stomach grumbled, and suddenly Arthur felt wide awake again. He hadn't really eaten anything these past 24 hours, he realized, and sat up on the couch. Not on the plane, and hardly more than a bite during the layovers. And now, with the stress of travel behind him, his body was telling him that he needed to get some food soon. There was almost nothing to eat left in the apartment. At least not something he would like right now. Instant ramen and such really didn't sound great to his ears at the moment. He would go to the next fast food joint, get himself a burger after 8 days of eating exotic cuisine, then come back here and fall asleep on the couch. That sounded like a great plan. But he could hardly go out like that. He jumped up, turned, and headed for the bathroom. A nice shower would do wonders for him, Arthur told himself, as he took off his clothing and then hopped into the small cabin. The water, as cold as it was, really soothed his overheated skin. He could feel the sweat and grime washing off of him, the tiredness lessening, and slowly the exhaustion disappearing. Shower, eat, bed. That was what he told himself again and again, like a mantra. He smiled as it reminded him of some of the guys in the backstreet market, repeatedly shouting out their wares while looking around for anyone who might catch their eyes. Arthur's appearance had led to a half-dozen of them swarming him, pulling at him, and only his guide's immediate intervention had kept them from dragging him along the street. He wondered what the guide was doing right now. Probably welcoming another tourist, or maybe a whole group this time. He hoped the man was doing well, since he had taken such good care of him. Whatever he had wanted to do, this guy had come up with a plan on the spot to fulfill his every wish. He must have had connections everywhere. They had visited one of the older churches that should be off limits to tourists. A small local festival where Arthur hadn't understood a single thing. The procession of a corpse, dug up and still clothed in these fine garments, looking like a revered skeleton carried on the shoulders of 6 family members. He had never seen anything like that. People there, his guide had explained, didn't think of death as something bad per se. Funerals weren't meant for mourning the passing, but for celebrating their lives, and it was customary to dig up the dead and parade them around whenever something remarkable was about to happen. He had told him stories of people having 12 corpses at their wedding, or the body of a long-dead matron being carried past a hospital where a woman was having trouble giving birth. Stuff like that. Arthur shivered as he remembered, and smiled again. His guide had been great, and he almost never lost his composure. Only once, and that was at the strange backstreet market, when they had passed a small stall of an old woman selling clothing. Arthur had stopped and looked at some items, while his guide had tried to push him along. That had been their only disagreement. Arthur had watched as the old woman in the stall hissed something at his guide, and the man had responded with what he assumed was a whole flurry of insults. He had never seen him that angry. But the old woman had simply remained calm, had smiled, and then had stood up and had pulled the nicest-looking suit Arthur had ever seen from one of the racks, holding it out for him to touch it. He had done so, against the warnings of the guide. It really was a beautiful suit. Off-white, which he would normally never wear, but immaculately clean, and it looked like it would fit him perfectly. A jacket, pants, and even a shirt, all in the same color, but no sign of any name or brand emblazoned on them. The old woman had smiled at him, winked, held out a hand, mumbling a number Arthur hadn't understood. At least not until his guide had translated. It had been cheap. Very, very cheap. About as much as the burger he intended to get in a few minutes would cost him at the current exchange rate. Arthur had taken it, Such a deal would otherwise be impossible to come by, and his guide had simply shaken his head in defeat. He had dragged him away from the stall, not even a second after he paid and got the suit, hissing at him to just keep walking. From that moment on, the atmosphere there had changed. The other vendors had looked at him with these strange expressions as he had carried the white suit on his arm, while his guide had dragged him along. Arthur shook his head and spat out some of the water. His guide had told him about it only later. Some of those clothing stalls had a bad reputation. There were a few that would either steal their wares from normal people or, even worse, rob them from the graves. Suits in particular were a very bad sign. Arthur had looked at the pieces of garment in his hands and had shaken his head. There was no way this suit had ever been in a coffin, he had told the guide. The man had simply shaken his head. He had told him that it would be better not to wear it. At least not there. If anyone were to recognize a fitted suit like that, there would be hell to pay. They might have actually killed him. And there wouldn't have been much anyone could have done about that. So Arthur had put the suit in his bag and pretty much forgotten about it. Until now. He hopped out of the shower and dried himself off before walking out into his apartment and toward the front door, where his heavy bag stood. Arthur got out underwear, socks, and a suit. It really did look amazing. Even though he had stashed it in the bag for the whole journey, it didn't seem crumpled up at all. He held it up to the light, where its off-white color seemed to almost shine, and then pulled out the pants and shirt to get dressed. It wasn't like he was intending to go out like that, but he really wanted to know what he would look like wearing such a suit. If it was too gaudy, well, Halloween would soon come around. He was sure he'd at least catch some stares like that at one of the parties. Arthur put it on fully, taking care not to miss a single button on the shirt, before he finally stepped in front of a mirror to take a look at himself. It fit perfectly. From the length of the pants to the sleeves, he could feel the material on his shoulders, but the fabric was neither being stretched nor too loose, no matter how he moved. It felt as if the suit had been tailored just for him. He turned around again and again, trying to find anything out of place, but couldn't find a single problem. This suit actually highlighted everything he liked about himself, and seemed to hide the stuff he felt self-conscious about. It was perfect. He smiled brightly and thanked that old woman in the stall in his thoughts. It was just a bit past 6 in the evening, so officially, he was still on vacation, right? He'd ignore the stares, and if he came across anyone he knew, he'd just tell them that. Arthur could see himself grinning from ear to ear. The only thing he wouldn't put on were dress shoes. He didn't have a pair that would match that color anyway, and right now, his feet needed the comfort of his normal sneakers. Arthur grabbed his wallet and phone, took his keys, and left the apartment behind to get himself something to eat. He could feel a cool breeze blowing as he walked down the hallway and toward the elevator. Someone had opened a few windows in the old building and let in the draft. He really didn't mind, especially right now with the heat still lingering in the city like that. Arthur reached the elevator and looked up in dismay. The small digital display was malfunctioning, showing the elevator he had taken only half an hour earlier at the bottom and top floors in rapid succession. He didn't want to use it if it was behaving like that. What if he got stuck in there? Right now, that would feel like a death sentence. Instead of pressing the button to call it, Arthur turned toward the stairs and started descending them at a leisurely pace. He didn't have to hurry right now. The fast food joint would be open whenever he arrived, and after that journey back, he really didn't want to run anywhere or do anything strenuous. He descended the flight of stairs and suddenly heard voices down below. 2 of them, to be exact. Both male, both young. Arthur felt a pang of fear as he noticed their heightened tones. They were angry, hissing at each other. Fights in this building were hardly rare, but he still didn't want to walk in on one. He stopped his feet and listened for a moment, but the voices didn't calm down. Well, he could call the elevator, he thought, but immediately shook his head. That thing was a death trap. He had thought so the first time he had set foot in it, and he was still of the same opinion. At least twice a week it got stuck, and if the display was already bugging out, he would stay as far away from it as possible. He could walk back up and either eat the instant ramen or wait for half an hour. Nah, that wouldn't do either. He already knew the ramen would taste like cardboard, and after coming home, he needed some real food. Arthur heard his stomach rumbling again, louder this time. He really needed something to eat. If those 2 down there were still fighting, he would simply pass them by, he told himself. It wasn't like there was a robbery going on, or anything he might get involved in. Arthur took a deep breath and descended the next flight of stairs, toward the angry voices. He could feel his hand trembling, and kept it close to his body so as to not show them that he was nervous. The second he stepped foot onto the floor below, the voices stopped. 2 pairs of eyes fell upon him. He could feel it before he could even see them. But as he looked over and met the first, then the second one, Arthur felt a chill in the air. They were in the corner next to the window, and he could see that one of them had his hand on the other's collar already. A fight was breaking out, that much was clear. Arthur took another step and could see the one closer to him concentrating on him fully, while the other's free hand shot down to his waistband. The other one seemed to realize what was happening as well. Arthur saw him jump back, away from the guy he had been grabbing, then heard a scream as the gun appeared between them. Time seemed to freeze as he looked at the 2. He could see the black handgun at hip height, a finger on the trigger. One of the guys gave off a shout, and Arthur tried to jump down the next flight of stairs, but his body reacted far too slowly. A flash of light filled his vision, just before a bang cut through the scream, followed by 2 more. He heard a bullet hitting one of the doors, the second one bursting a light bulb above. The third one he didn't hear, but felt. Something hard and hot hit him just above the hip. Arthur stumbled backwards, more from the shock than the impact. One of the guys ran toward him as the one with the gun jumped into the apartment they had been standing next to. The spot above his hip turned ice cold as he sank to his knees and watched the man almost jump over him and run down the stairs. There was a red spot on his white shirt, Arthur realized, and pressed his hand against it. Hot liquid gushed out between his fingers. He felt strange. There was no pain, but his whole body was shaking. His mind was in turmoil. He had been shot. A bullet had pierced him. The white fabric of his shirt was turning red. It looked like a flower blooming beneath his hand. Arthur groaned. But why was there no pain? The apartment complex around him had fallen almost completely silent as he knelt there, hoping and praying for some kind of miracle. What should he do? He could feel the shock still clouding his mind. The hand not clasped over the wound was shaking so badly that he could do nothing with it. Would he die? Here? On the stairs of the apartment complex? He should call for help. Arthur kept looking down at the white fabric and red bloom. It was beautiful, in a strange, almost frightening way. He felt his back touch the handrail as the first spell of dizziness gripped him. There still was no pain, and Arthur couldn't decide what to do. What was going on here? This wasn't... He felt himself falling over. Then his head hit the floor. His whole body was shaking now as he got tunnel vision. Arthur tried to fight against it, but it felt like he wasn't inside his own body anymore. No matter what he tried to do, nothing happened. He couldn't even lift a single finger. Fear struck his mind. Something was wrong here, he thought, just as the darkness finally swallowed the last bit of light in front of his eyes. But Arthur found no rest in the dark. There were voices around him, talking in hushed tones. Sound of drums. Birds and insects that shouldn't be anywhere close to the apartment complex. No, they sounded like they were coming straight out of the jungle, the place he had visited for his vacation. He could feel his heart slowing down and the voices getting quieter. There was another sound coming from above him, and it was one that made the blood freeze in his veins. He listened to it closely. He couldn't stop concentrating on it. Dirt was hitting the lid of a coffin just above his head. Arthur wanted to scream, but no sound was coming out of his mouth. There was no air in here, in the coffin. He couldn't even move. A low, cruel chuckle broke through the monotonous noise, and Arthur opened his eyes. Light fell upon him, but the sounds from before vanished. He could finally move his body again, jumped up as quickly as he could, and grabbed hold of the railing by the stairs. His heart was racing. Sweat was running down his back. What was going on here? Arthur looked down at his body and could see nothing. He was wearing the immaculate white suit while still pressing one hand against his hip. But there was no longer blood on the fabric. Shaking his head, Arthur staggered back and looked around. No one had come here. He was completely alone. But he didn't feel like it. No. Some part of him warned him that he wasn't alone at all right now. He cursed and whirled around, then ran up the stairs. Something bad was going on here. He had been shot, but he didn't feel any pain from it. And now, there wasn't even a stain on his shirt. Arthur looked down and more closely at his hip. Dried blood still caked his hand, but there was no sign of a wound on him anymore. This was too strange. He needed to get back to his apartment to take a closer look. Arthur continued running up the stairs until he reached his floor, then turned and hurried along the corridor. Something bad was going on. He needed help. The moment Arthur reached the door to his apartment, he rammed the key into the lock and barged inside. It had been a bad idea, going out like this. He almost stumbled over the bag as he threw shut the door and locked it behind himself. Who could help him now? Police? Doubtful. If he called emergency services claiming he'd been shot but not showing any wounds, they would think he was insane. No, he needed someone who might know what was going on. Like his guide. Arthur took out his phone as he jumped over the bag and walked toward the living room. His free hand grabbed the corner of the jacket as he was getting ready to pull it off, but stopped suddenly. A cold chill gripped him. There, beneath the normal sounds in his apartment, he could hear it. Drums. They were quiet, almost inaudible, but he felt them nonetheless. He looked around. No one was there. Then why did it feel like someone was watching him openly? He could sense eyes on him, burrowing holes into his body. Someone was in here with him, his instincts told him, and Arthur could feel his legs starting to tremble. He was not alone. No. He shook his head, pulled at the white jacket to get it off his arm, and suddenly felt it get stuck. The fabric didn't move off his shoulder. He could feel it straining as he ripped at it, but the jacket stayed in place. With a growl, he stopped, then pulled again, only to find his arm move, but the piece of garment stuck to him. Arthur staggered and almost fell onto the couch. He was cursing, in his mind and out loud. What the hell was up with this suit? He remembered the guide's words again. Bad luck. Yeah, this here was more than just bad luck. Something truly evil was going on. He unlocked his phone and looked at his contact list. There was the name of the guide, together with his number. His thumb pressed a small icon before he chose to set the phone to speaker mode and started pacing through the room. His one free hand was tugging and pulling at the jacket, but the suit still wasn't budging. He could feel the panic getting worse. The phone in his hand beeped as the connection was established. All that was needed now was for his guide to pick up. Arthur let go of the jacket and made his fingers concentrate on the buttons of the shirt. Maybe if he got them loose, the other piece would come off as well. He passed by the open door to the bathroom and suddenly froze on the spot. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see himself in the mirror. But it wasn't himself. Not his hand. Not his head. Especially not his face. Arthur wanted to scream as he turned to face the mirror and almost shrieked. What he could see there was an old man standing in his place, wearing the exact same suit he had on. Between the toot of the phone, he could hear the drums again, playing their rhythmic sound. The old man in the mirror was grinning from ear to ear. Arthur wanted to scream, but the old man lifted his hand and put a finger in front of his lips. He could feel it. The fingertip touching his lips. Arthur jumped back and looked down. His own hand was raised. What was going on here? He could feel the cold dread deep in his bones, while the phone still beeped, but the other party didn't pick up. Turning his head, he walked away from the mirror and the figure therein. He couldn't stand looking at it any longer. Something very bad was happening. His thumb pressed the icon on the screen of his phone, cutting off the call. The guide wouldn't pick up. At least not now. He sent him a message instead. "Call me. Urgent. Something is wrong. Please help me." The sound of the drums hadn't stopped this time. He could hear them, feel them, deep inside. The suit was cursed, and whoever had been buried in it was still here. Now, inside of him, trying to take over. Arthur felt dizzy. He looked up and suddenly found himself no longer standing in the living room. Somehow, he was back in the bathroom again. His shoes were squeaking on the tiles below him as he shifted his weight back and forth. Right in front of his face was the mirror, and from it, 2 cold eyes stared out at him. He wanted to avert his gaze, but his body didn't move. The old man was still grinning widely, and Arthur felt the corner of his own lips trembling as they slowly moved upwards. He wanted to scream and cry out, but his body didn't listen to him anymore. His mind was racing. What should he do? He remembered his guide's stories about witch doctors and the like. No, shamans, they wanted to be called. Some of them were helping. Others were hurting people. His guide had kept him away from the worst ones. The ones not allowed inside the villages. Had one of them done this? Put a curse on him? Or was it the suit? He looked and caught the old man in his reflection, still grinning, now lifting his head and lowering it. Arthur felt himself nodding along. Drums were getting louder. Their sound was filling his ears. Somewhere behind him, his phone was dinging. A new message. A guide. Arthur wanted to turn around and run toward it, but the old man in the mirror kept him in place. He could do nothing but watch as his grin got even wider and his body started to move more fluently, just like the man in the mirror. The old man moved his lips silently, and Arthur's mouth went along. A word came out of his throat. It was in a language he didn't speak, yet instantly understood. "Come," he said. "Come." The world around him got darker and darker. He tried to scream and thrash, but his body was moving on its own. The white suit was almost shining in the already low light. He could hear the drums. They were playing just for him. His heartbeat was racing, as were theirs. Arthur cried out in his mind as the darkness took him, and his soul was swallowed. He was back, just like he had promised. The white suit still fit him, and the young body, while still a bit sluggish, started to obey him as well. He chuckled and watched himself in the mirror. With new eyes, he looked around the strangely small bathroom in this strange new place. It didn't matter. He had promised his followers he would return, and now he could pick up where he had left off before he had died. With a laugh, he turned away from the mirror and walked out of the bathroom and toward his new life.